Let me guess. You saw my last video, picked up a stack of singles, and decided to give Yu-Gi-Oh! A spin. You made a mental note that high-level monsters require sacrifices in order to call upon their great power. And you rolled up to your locals or your Polycules game night armed with 3 minutes of knowledge and $8 of cardboard. And you got destroyed. You watched aghast as your opponent made move after move, wall comboing you into your chair Broly style, far past the point where your Gemini elf would have been any help. You grimaced as they summoned monster after monster without any sacrifices whatsoever. And you couldn't believe when the game ended on their very first turn. You couldn't help but think, what happened? Did I miss something in the tutorial? And then, a horrifying realization. What if you didn't? What if what you just experienced wasn't the result of an SEO-driven lie I perpetuated? What if this was how every game played out? How and why would anyone ever enjoy this?
Well, don't worry. I'll tell you.
The Yu-Gi-Oh! You inferred is dead, if it ever even really existed at all. And from the sun-bleached bones of a marketing tool designed for babies over the course of a weekend has sprouted new flesh in never-ending fractals, building upon themselves, a divinity of the complex, a mass of corner cases and contradictions not unlike your own transformation to adulthood. As you've grown, it has too. A culture in cardboard, lightly played on TCG Player. Explaining why people choose to play this game above all others is remarkably similar to explaining how to play it. I can give you a glib, unsatisfactory answer. People play Yu-Gi-Oh! Because there's nothing like it, but that'll likely be about as helpful as the 3-minute overview you just sat through. So today, I'm going to try to teach you both. What follows is an incredibly long and detailed primer on the idiosyncrasies of the card game, alongside an incredibly long and detailed love letter to the people, events, and mythologies that are just as important. My hope is by the end of this video, you'll not only be an expert at Yu-Gi-Oh!, you'll be a fan. Let's begin at the beginning. Yu-Gi-Oh! Began in 1996 as a smash hit in Shonen Jump. It told the story of a young boy, Yugi, possessed through the Millennium Puzzle with the spirit of an ancient Egyptian pharaoh. This sadistic ancient ruler loved games and would assist Yu-Gi-Oh! And his friends through penalty games, in which ne'er-do-wells would find themselves at risk of losing their lives at his hands. These games were gory, gruesome, and usually ended with Yugi's victory. Then one week, as part of an ongoing storyline where Yugi and his pals were stuck in a death machine, the pharaoh challenged his rival, Kaiba, to a game of Magic and Wizards. Intended to be a send-up of Magic the Gathering, this card game was a hastily produced mechanism to tell a story, combining both elements from popular card games as well as tabletops, both of which were favorites of its author, Kazuki Takahashi. After publication of this chapter, everything changed. For some reason, audiences loved Magic and Wizards and demanded more of it. The manga pivoted. It was drastically retooled, and rather than the story of the Pharaoh's penalty games, it became the story of Duel Monsters, a game of ancient and terrible power. The manga, followed by the anime, were incredible successes. Then they made it stateside to become even more popular. If any of you are familiar with the show, you're probably also familiar with its central problem. Early on, there aren't really a well-defined set of rules for the game. Cards are played, and they generally do things, but those things vary wildly from episode to episode. Parallel to the manga's attempts to find its footing were toy manufacturers' attempts to build a card game from scratch that could be played in the same way as characters that seemed to mostly be making it up as they go. It took a couple of tries, but eventually, Konami was able to pioneer a way for people to pay for cardboard. The release of Yu-Gi-Oh! As we know it coincided with the second season of the anime, in which one of the characters releases, in-universe, the advanced rulebook. Basically, we started playing as soon as they did. From the get, things were sloppy. At base, Duel Monsters was ripping off Magic the Gathering, so adapting the game into something reminiscent of the granddaddy of card games, distinct enough to avoid liability, and most importantly, functional, was a challenge. Early Yu-Gi-Oh! And a rules committee managed by American distributor Upper Deck Entertainment did the best they could to make a product that was beloved in its own right. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a phenomenon, all the way to the end of the anime's run. Once Yugi and his friends' adventures came to a close, a significant amount of duelists sealed their binders away with the Pharaoh's memories. A new series debuted that felt a little more kid-friendly, the new cards failed to make much of a splash, and many millennials took their leave. By 2008, Yu-Gi-Oh's cultural import had all but evaporated in the States, and the central conceit of the then airing Yu-Gi-Oh 5Ds, card games on motorcycles, became an in-joke between jaded anime viewers. It looked like this once-beloved show would be mostly remembered as a short-lived competitor to Pokemon, and not much else. Except for one thing. I'm here with a veritable Yu-Gi-Oh! Celebrity. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. My name's Martin Billany. I'm known as Little Karibo on YouTube and the rest of the internet at this point. And I love Yu-Gi-Oh! And I've loved Yu-Gi-Oh! Ever since I first watched it on the telly. I was trying to tune in to watch Pokemon, and I caught Yu-Gi-Oh! By mistake, and I was like, is this Pokemon? No, it's something else. And I fell in love with it very quickly to the point that I wanted to engage with other fans, and my tendency is to express my love for things by making fun of them, by I used to write like parody scripts just for myself back in the day, and when I found Yu-Gi-Oh! I was like, this is rife for parody, it's so over the top, and I feel like there are people who would never watch this unless it was presented to them in a more humorous context. So it was almost my way of trying to engage in the fandom, introduce myself to the fandom, and also hopefully get other people to watch Yu-Gi-Oh! Wherein I made a series of videos where I condensed the plot of every Yu-Gi-Oh! Episode, or at least to a point, down to about 5 to 10 minutes. That time has extended as the series has progressed, but originally it was about 5 minutes per episode, and it was an abbreviated comedic take on the events of the story of Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yu-Gi-Oh! The Abridged series was incredibly influential not only for Yu-Gi-Oh! Players, but also for YouTube. What was it like being around for the early days of the platform?
Gosh, I mean, I think it came out in its infancy. YouTube, at the time, had been around for at least, I want to say, the better part of a year. And I'd wanted to make content for some time, and YouTube was really the first real opportunity for a lot of people to sort of sit down and get their hands dirty and actually make stuff that would be easily accessible. So I think that it was right place, right time for me in a lot of ways, because a lot of people, there were a lot of people making things with shoestring budget. You could tell that a lot of the creators that were putting stuff up were just one person sort of riffing on a concept. It was the Wild West, anything goes, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged kind of fit neatly into this sort of anime-shaped hole. There were a lot of people uploading anime content, but I don't know how many people were uploading consistently sort of a running series of anime-themed comedy videos. And when I first put it out there, I didn't know it was going to be a series. I thought it was just going to be sort of one and done. So it was as much a surprise to me that the YouTube audience and the general sort of Yu-Gi-Oh! Fandom latched onto it as passionately as they did, and I really do. I really am gobsmacked by it even to this day. It's so incredible to me that there were people who really got enthusiastic about the fan project. I'm a big proponent of fan-based content. I think fandoms are really creative in what they do, and I was honored to be even a small part of it.
Since then, you've become a mainstay among Yu-Gi-Oh fans, convention goers, and online spaces. What has it been like realizing the immense impact your work has had on people?
Overall, it's been a little overwhelming. I try not to think about it. I'm a pretty low-key guy. I will admit that the attention that I gained from it was something I really had to get used to. I started Yu-Gi-Oh in a time in my life when I didn't have a lot of people. I didn't have a lot of friends, and I gained friendships through doing the parody content. I gained friendships from talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! And talking about these characters and sharing these stories with everybody. But the popularity and the attention, definitely not something that I'm a natural with. I have to sort of most times sort of present sort of myself as a character, almost a character version of myself to sort of get through it. But I'm always very humbled by it, and at the end of the day, people do come up to me and they say the quotes, and I often get asked, like, do you get tired of it? I never get tired of the passion that people show whenever they do that sort of thing. I think it's a huge compliment. And I used to be that guy. I used to be the guy shouting quotes at people in class. I would like come into school and just start quoting TV shows I'd watched the night before. And it's just an expression of love. It's an expression of enthusiasm, and I always take it that way. It's when people talk to me like I am the characters that gets a bit weird, because I'm not an Egyptian pharaoh. It might surprise you to learn this. But yes, I'm very humbled, sometimes overwhelmed, but always grateful.
Yu-Gi-Oh! is one of the first properties to cultivate what we would conceive of as a modern fandom. Let me be clear, it certainly wasn't the first community full of people writing fanfic, building shrines to the characters, and getting in shit fits about who Tristan was supposed to be fucking.
I feel like the luckiest person in the world to have a friend as awesome as you, Tristan.
Did she say friend? Oh man, I'm stuck in the friend zone!
But just by virtue of the time period in which it existed, it was able to become one of the first IPs with widespread success across platforms.
Yeah!
Some kids remembered it from television, others may have picked up a Shonen Jump at the Scholastic Book Fair, but popularized by creators like Little Karibo was one of the first enormous online fandoms. The internet was becoming a more impactful driver of real-life culture daily, and in a time before YouTube was the standard for video sharing, people were willing to trek to other homepages and watch some questionably DMCA'd fandubs. Importantly, this fandom didn't stay online. While cultural barometers like the first use of uwu were conceived from a dial-up connection, it translated to a very real presence in real life.
Goodbye.
Cosplayers, writers, and con attendees chanting "Screw the rules, I have money" to thunderous applause, permeating meat space at a time when online fandom had previously been a thing of forums and BBS debates about subs and dubs. This community, and the dedicated fans and creators within it, was sufficient to keep the franchise alive, but hardly thriving. As GX faded into the distance and millennials became more obsessed with fancy lattes and renting than cardboard, Yu-Gi-Oh! Entered a period of stagnation. Merchandise disappeared from shelves, tie-ins became fewer and farther between, huge portions of the ongoing show weren't even being translated or dubbed. It's hard to explain to today's Zoomerians, who have grown up on a steady diet of Hypeland collaborations, but there was a time within the decade where you could walk into a Hot Topic and see 3 different Homestuck shirts and Dick fucking Nothing sporting a Millennium item. This cultural drought continued until about 2017, when Konami released Duel Links, half gacha, half old-school Yu-Gi-Oh! Simulator. It's clear this app was designed for a couple of months, maybe a year, of juicing the last few nostalgic millennials out of their avocado toast money. Konami was instead blindsided by a reaction they hadn't been expecting. People actually liked playing Yu-Gi-Oh! It was also the flashpoint for a competitive scene, developed at the community level by streamers like Decade. This massive success signaled to Konami that they had something here, and they raced to capitalize on the IP through the last few years of the teens. FYE tie-ins, a new game mode designed to reintroduce anti-synchro holdouts to Yu-Gi-Oh!, shirts, skateboards, pop-ups, Funko Pops. For the first time in forever, Yu-Gi-Oh! Fans were eating good. Around this time, another figure emerged, the Yugi Tuber. People like Little Karibo had been making Yu-Gi-Oh! Videos forever, but tons of people had since realized riffing about card games online was a viable model for a YouTube channel. Skits, deck profiles, and duels using janky simulators
I summoned Pot of Greed to draw 3 additional cards from my deck!
had nurtured a niche but beloved base of so-called Yugi-tubers like Vexicus666, Mega Capital G, and Galactigod. But emboldened by the game's renewed cultural import, the modern Yugi-tuber was born. These showmen made weekly reality show-style series like SEMO, cinematic content like Nim Nim, and more traditional streamer humor highlights like Farfa. Yu-Gi-Oh! Had become more than a hobby you had to take pains not to mention in mixed company. It had become a movement. And the hits kept coming. During COVID, a lot of people were spending a lot of time inside, and there's only so many sourdoughs you can start.
I'm gonna have to give this sausage here a 4 out of 5.
Card games were booming, with tons of potential duelists suddenly saddled with a shitload of free time.
I think I'm gonna get back into Yu-Gi-Oh!
Konami capitalized with the release of what remains its flagship moneymaker, Master Duel.
I'm recording.
I'm here with Paragon of the community, Farfa Yu-Gi-Oh! Or should I call you Glasgow?
Ex-Glasgow YGO, Farfa in the flesh. Die.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about when Master Duel came out. What was it like streaming Yu-Gi-Oh! Before the release of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel?
It's really weird because looking at this game from the perspective of a viewer and from the very, very niche 0.00001% perspective of a streamer is going to be really difficult, I think, for some people to engage with and understand. But before Master Duel, I think it was probably just a case of like YGO Pro gaming with viewers. And I guess my most successful content was essentially just dueling book drama and toxic replays, which, you know, for better or for worse, was most of my content.
So you would load up stream, you'd sit there for 6 hours, and what, you'd jam games on Dueling Book? You'd look for people calling each other slurs? What was it like?
I think Master Duel was just after COVID, so during the COVID era, we did have, of course, yours truly's MCS events, which was, you know, cool to prepare for and talk about, and things like that. There was also a ton of luxury events going on at the time. So,
yeah.
But yeah, it really was just sort of like dueling book meta, with tournaments thrown in here and there.
One beautiful morning in 2021, Master Duel is released at like 2 a.m. What happened afterwards? Do you remember like the week following its release?
Yeah, it's crazy because I think any sort of, maybe like self-employed people in general reach this like real hallmark type of Watergate moment? Wait, what's the term? It's not a Watergate moment. Watershed moment.
Watershed moment. It was a Watergate moment. Yeah, we were really doing a lot of crime.
There was this moment in time where everything and anything you do from this point onwards can branch off into like a billion different possibilities. That first week was incredible. I mean, from my perspective, just consistently streaming to, we're talking almost 5-digit numbers concurrent, like 6,000-7,000 people, like for that first week or something. Unbelievable.
I remember waking up like at 8 or 9 a.m. every day and just pressing go live and then streaming until like 11 or 12 at night, like every day that week, like as long as I could. It was just crazy, right?
It made so much sense because, oh, this thing that is basically a gift to a content creator is just dropped. But from my perspective, I do really regret not focusing way more on the YouTube side of things.
I want to ask you, so what did the Master Duel release mean for the community? To have sort of one simulator by which we all played the game?
I think Master Duel had very mixed reception, depending on which demographic you ask. So the already sold and invested TCG players all hyped up on Master Duel and got into the game, and then, you know, everyone you knew was just in Discord calls with one another, playing the game, having fun. super exciting and fun for like a week. But then like the TCG players started realizing, well, hang on a second, like this isn't our game, right? It's a whole ass different format. It's like Trizu from like 6 months ago. There's Maxi. And so people started to really realize this is just a different game. A lot of like, veteran hardened TCG players left Master Duel very quickly. On the other hand, the average casual nostalgic Yu-Gi-Oh, boomer who used to collect the cards once upon a time, a lot of people jump into the game and are still invested until today because of Master Duel itself. So it was massive day one. I think 100,000 players potentially. It was more played than Counter-Strike, could you believe, within that first few days. So
we're now 3.5, maybe 4 years on from the release of Master Duel. What has it done to the community, and where has the community landed as a result, do you think?
It's so weird. I think I'm gonna blame you for this, but it feels like the game is somewhat divided between different audiences and playstyles and attitudes towards the game and the digital game and the physical game. And I think a lot of that is projection from frustrations with Konami from all angles. TCG players are frustrated with the TCG. Master Duel players are frustrated with Master Duel. I don't know. It feels like it's in this weird position of uncertainty, but also maybe stagnation is probably the best way to look at it.
Master Duel was an inflection point for the community. Not only was Yu-Gi-Oh! Back in a big way, but everyone online, from big-name streamers to Olympians to sitting congressmen, was in. Yu-Gi-Oh's gone from a childhood classic to a niche online fandom to an integral part of our culture. So, once again, here's how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And we're getting this in one. I'm Babe Ruth calling my shot. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a trading card game played with pieces of cardboard. Each individual card has a front and a back. Cards printed in Japan and many Asian territories have a different card back than the ones printed in the West, and as a result, can't be used in TCG territories. Cards come in one of 3 super types: monsters, spells, and traps, denoted by the color of the card itself. Spell cards are green, trap cards are purple, and everything else is a monster. Each spell and trap card will have an icon under the super type bubble, denoting if it is an equip, field, quick play, ritual, continuous, or counter. If they lack an icon, they are referred to as a normal spell or a normal trap. Monster cards can be found in both the main deck, a 40 to 60 card pile of cardboard, or the extra deck, a 15 card maximum pile placed on the opposite side of your deck. We'll talk about extra deck monsters momentarily, but for now let's focus on main deck ones. Each monster card has an attribute, denoted by a little bubble in the top right corner, a level, denoted by a number of stars between the name and the art, a type, and an ability, effect, flip, tune, and the like. Normal monsters are yellow, and in the box under their type they have italicized flavor text with no gameplay implications, but gives you a little peek into the world of Yu-Gi-Oh! Effect monsters have effect text, cool stuff they're allowed to do under certain conditions. Each card can be played in one of the on-field zones. These front 5 are called the main monster zones, and they're reserved for monsters from your main deck. Mostly. When playing a monster card, you place it from your hand into one of these zones. This is called a summon. The back 5 zones are called spell and trap zones, and they're where you activate spell and trap cards. We'll talk about these momentarily, but spell cards can be activated as many times as you like, and trap cards must be set face down, then flipped up at the right opportunity at least one turn later. Here on the right is your graveyard, or GY, a face-up zone where monster cards go when they are destroyed, used as material for most extra deck summons or otherwise used up, and spell and trap cards go after use. Underneath it is your deck, from which you will draw one card at the start of your turn. On the left we have the field zone, where you may play exactly one field spell, and underneath it, the extra deck, a face-down zone where you place up to 15 extra cards before the game begins. Finally, sideways above the graveyard is your banishment, where monsters that have become banished through card effect go, and directly above your second and fourth zone are the extra monster zones. This was nice, right? Explaining the game board, the anatomy of a card. Well, we've now reached our first impasse. See, Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't just a game board developed by a few overworked executives in 1998. It's a map whose topography represents decades of successes and mistakes. And one of the most visible of these is the Extra Monster Zone. In 2016, Yu-Gi-Oh!'s format was in chaos. 6 months of one silly monster combo was being followed up with another 6 months of another silly monster combo. There were still dark times for Yu-Gi-Oh!'s cultural import, and it was near impossible to beat back accusations from normies that Yu-Gi-Oh! Was competitive solitaire when faced with mind-numbing combo decks like DDD. In both a debut of a new mechanic, and at least in part an attempt to slow the pace of play, Konami released their most controversial rule change of all time, Master Rule 4. This rule, taking effect with the release of a new summoning ability in 2017, required that any monster summoned from the extra deck be summoned in one of 2 zones specifically relegated for extra deck monsters, the Extra Monster Zones. Now, you can only control one of these zones, and upon summoning a monster to one of them, the other became the purview of your opponents. The new extra deck mechanic unveiled alongside this change, Link monsters, played off this as well. Each monster had arrows pointing to other zones, which indicated that each linked zone was also permissible for an extra deck summon. In short, if you were playing an extra deck combo strategy, you'd have to not only find material in that combo for Link monsters, you'd have to buy them. This change was met with uproar. While many players did align with the goals of the Extra Monster Zone, slowing down the pace of play to something comprehensible, this was both, 1, not an effective solution, the decks that were good before were still good in the new Master Rule, and 2, completely cynical. Wow, so we have to purchase new cards for our pet decks to solve a problem you created. Cool. The backlash to this was so unthinkable, Konami reversed in part this Master Rule in an addendum announced on, and I'm not fucking with you, April Fools, which allowed Synchros, Xyzs, and Fusions to be summoned to the main monster zones. Now the EMZ languishes as a general embarrassment, and a holding facility specifically for Link monsters and face-up pendulums. More on those momentarily. Okay, that's the board. Now let's talk about the cards. The first and most common type of card we'll discuss is monster cards. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a game about summoning monsters, a sentence that really freaked out a lot of housewives in the aughts. Each turn, the turn player can perform a normal summon by placing one of the monsters from their hand in the main monster zone. Each monster can be normal summoned in attack position or set in face-down defense position. If the monster you're attempting to normal summon has more than 4 stars, you will need to offer a tribute. 1 monster on the field to the graveyard for monsters with 5 or 6 stars, 2, 4, 7, and above. This is the platonic ideal of Yu-Gi-Oh! Gameplay. Each turn you put your best guy on the field, then you compare stats with an opponent like some sort of demonic version of war. It's the type of Yu-Gi-Oh! You probably remember from your childhood, either playing by yourself during recess before the teachers wised up, or watching the television show every Saturday morning. I call this implied Yu-Gi-Oh! It's the Yu-Gi-Oh! You're taught in these how-to-play guides. The Yu-Gi-Oh! The Master Duel tutorial tricks you into thinking you'll experience. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Lamented for at length by YouTubers who knew everything went to shit when those white cards moved in. But it's never really been the Yu-Gi-Oh! That's been played. In the OCG circa 1999, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was played like this, but it didn't last long. By the time the TCG got its Cheeto-covered hands on this cardboard, our understanding of what a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Was had already evolved considerably. If both players only got 1 normal summon a turn, then cheating that limit would net incredible tempo. Enter special summons. A special summon is a normal summon, except it's not. You can only perform them by card effect, but playing cards that enable them is paramount. A special summoned monster can be summoned in face-up attack or face-up defense position unless otherwise specified, does not require tributes for high-level monsters, and importantly, does not use your normal summon for the turn. As early as 2003, everyone was playing cards like Last Will, Monster Reborn, and Premature Burial. But the selling point of a significant amount of strategies involved how effectively their monster lineup could perform these special summons. Mystic Tomato could special summon a monster from deck when destroyed, allowing you to toolbox through flexible options from the deck. The Rock Spirit could special itself from the hand in an earth-heavy deck, allowing huge tempo swings when paired with your normal. Finally, in 2005, only 3 years after Yu-Gi-Oh's arrival in America, the game changed forever with the release of a single card, Cyber Dragon. This card turned the game on its head. Huge swings off the back of special summoning were nothing new, but now everybody could do it. And the worst part? It was fun. Instead of slowly managing a setup over the course of a dozen turns, games were fast, swings were big, you started dealing huge damage right away. And Konami responded in kind. Cyber Dragon became the template for decades of design. Over the next few years, the normal summon would transform from the backbone of gameplay to an afterthought. Yu-Gi-Oh! Wasn't about comparing attack stats, it was about special, big combos, big damage, let me show you what my deck can do! This transformation was aided by a similar design shift in the extra deck. This stack of cards, prepared before a tournament and sleeved up in a different sleeve than the main deck, can be consulted and summoned from at any time. Originally, the extra deck contained only one type of card, Fusion Monsters. Fusion Monsters are purple, and usually have 2 or more named monsters right under their typing. They can be summoned using the spell card Polymerization, and by sending the named monsters from your hand or field to the graveyard. Once you've done that, you can special summon the fusion monster from your extra deck to any of your main monster zones or the extra monster zone. Now, not all fusions work this way. Some can be summoned by banishing named monsters, and some don't have any material at all. They're summoned by completely different mechanisms. In any of these cases, the card will clearly explain the conditions under which you can summon them. Polymerization isn't the only way to summon these monsters either. Many archetypes will have their own special fusion card that's an upgrade over the basic one. At Yu-Gi-Oh's advent, these cards were mostly unsummonable trash, with a few exceptions. But everything changed at the release of 5Ds and our second extra deck summoning type,
Let's rev it up!
Synchros. Synchros are white, and usually have 2 or more materials listed under their typing. 1 tuner, and 1 or more non-tuner monsters. They can be summoned by sending any monster and a tuner monster, a classification denoted on main deck monsters by this ability text, to the graveyard, provided their levels combined equal the level of the monster you're summoning. Stardust Dragon, for example, could use a level 4 tuner and a level 4 non-tuner. Unlike fusions, these monsters require very little in terms of a main deck requirement. No polymerization, for example. Upon release, it became immediately clear that playing the maximum number of copies of each individual monster was the way to go. It gave you the most flexible range of options. As a result, Konami shaved the maximum extra deck size down to 15, where it remains today. Then came Xyz. Xyz monsters are black and usually have 2 or more materials listed under their typing, 2 level 4 monsters, for instance. These can be summoned by stacking any monsters with the same level on top of each other, then placing the Xyz monster on top of the stack from your extra deck. For many players, this was a bridge too far. These cards required no main deck concessions whatsoever, and decks that otherwise didn't intend to use the extra deck could now improve their matchup spread simply by playing a monster that would come up in a corner case board state. It's important to note that this is about the same time the role of the extra deck began to shift. What had begun as a holding facility for corner case monsters had become a sort of second hand, an always accessible toolbox that allowed decks with clear weaknesses to get out of jail free on the back of a Castel or an Armades. But near the end of the lifespan of Xyz, the extra deck evolved into its final form, a group of cards that could be integrated into your combo setups. Foregoing the principle that the purpose of the extra deck was to be reactive, playmakers started to weasel their way into the always accessible extra, and rather than performing a combo string based on their opener, duelists began performing the same combo strings over and over again with 100% consistency, aided by cards in the extra. As early as 2012's wind-up format, the extra deck had become an assemblage of starters, extenders, end board pieces, and reactive toolbox options, and the main deck had become largely superfluous. Finally, we reach the present day and Link monsters. Originally thought to combat the above design trends, Link monsters are more guilty of combo in a can than anything else before it. Each Link monster can be summoned by sending the materials listed on the monster to the graveyard, and then placing the Link monster in only the extra monster zone, and only in attack position. Each Link monster has arrows pointing to its neighboring zones. These linked zones become additional extra monster zones. Notably, if a Link monster points to an opponent's main monster zone, then your opponent may summon a Link monster to that zone. Finally, you may perform an extra link by way of co-linking monsters in a U-shape between the two zones, in which case you may utilize both extra monster zones, locking an opponent out of their own links. Link monsters have been controversial. During Master Rule 4, duelists thought of them as a tax on the pet decks they had constructed decades ago. They're much more straightforward to summon than any of the above summoning types, but that means that if any of them have effects that are even remotely powerful, they're immediately suspect for a ban. Links have been responsible for more unplayable formats than any other summoning type, despite being around for less than a decade. Most memorably, Summon Sorceress and Firewall Dragon caused double digits of formats where top decks would kill you before the first turn of the duel, but it's suspected because Summon Sorceress was a promotional card and Firewall Dragon was the ace monster of a popular anime character, Konami refused to ban these cards for years after their original print. On the other hand, Link monsters are intuitive. They're a more straightforward version of all of these mechanics. They feel like the logical endpoint of Yu-Gi-Oh! And, regrettably, they're extremely fun to play with. It's these two shifts in design principle, the special summon as the main action taken by Yu-Gi-Oh! Players, and the extra deck as a second hand that are responsible for how Yu-Gi-Oh! Plays. Unlike other card games, in which a deck can perform completely differently each game based on the opener, a duelist will arrive at an event with a clear end goal in mind. This is what my deck does. Uninterrupted, they will be able to do that thing with 100% consistency, and the game will be determined by the effectiveness of an opponent's ability to stop their thing, as well as how the opponent's thing stacks up against it. Now that we've got a decent understanding of the different types of monster cards, let's deal with the most important part of them, the paragraph of text under their type line. Any monster card you're going to play is going to be saturated with effects. Back in the day, players were content with a card that did one thing ever. But as decks became more consistent, they started playing fewer and fewer cards with more applications, to the point where despite the lengthy text on cards, after only a few games of Yu-Gi-Oh!, you'll be familiar with the majority of what's being played. Regardless, here's how to read cards you're seeing for the first time. There are 4 types of effects a monster can have: an ignition effect, a trigger effect, a flip effect, a quick effect, and a continuous effect. Ignition effects can be activated, should you like, at any time during an open game state in your main phase. A good way of thinking about it is, anytime you're just fucking around and could theoretically set a card or something, you could use an ignition effect. A trigger effect can only occur when a specific event occurs. For instance, Mystic Tomato summons a monster when it's destroyed as a result of battle. A good rule of thumb for these cards is if their use case comes up, it'll trigger. This will make more sense as we get to nonsense like the damage step, but often if it's intended to work, it will. A quick effect works like an ignition effect, except it's quick. It can be activated as an ignition would, but also in response to other effects or activations and during any phase of the game. Finally, a continuous effect is an effect that applies continuously while the monster is face up on the field. I should note that there are a few effects that don't fall into any of these categories that we've just decided to call unclassified effects. There aren't a lot, but if you just read the card, it'll explain how it works. Effects are not to be confused with conditions. Conditions are parts of the effect text which are not effects and can't be negated. They'll usually refer to the mechanism by which a monster is summoned. Blackluster Soldier, Envoy at the beginning, can be summoned by banishing a light and a dark, even though that part of the effect text stops mattering once he's on field. There's one more part of the card we haven't talked about. Prior to the effect, you may see some words followed by a colon or a semicolon. Words prior to a colon refer to the timing during which a card can be activated. Words prior to a semicolon refer to the cost that must be paid in order to activate the effect. Even if the effect is negated, you'll have to pay those costs. One final note about costs is that they aren't effects. Cards that get a benefit if they're sent to the graveyard from a card effect, therefore, won't trigger if they are sent to pay the cost of a card. But cards that benefit if they're sent to the graveyard for any reason will. If this sounds like you're just getting a grammar lesson, sorry, but it's not going anywhere anytime soon. On that note, let's talk about conjunctions. Yu-Gi-Oh! Uses 4 conjunctive words on their card text. Then, also, and if you do, and. If an effect says to do A, then to do B, those effects happen in sequence, and A must happen for B to occur. If A doesn't happen due to some trickery by your opponent, then sorry, you've missed out on B. If an effect says do A, also do B, both effects happen at the same time, and either can happen independent of another. If an effect says do A and if you do B, both effects happen at the same time, but A must happen for B to occur. And finally, and. Do A and B. Simultaneous, but you've got to do both or neither. Let's take a breather. Now that's in my head. Iron Maiden, baby. Come with me Friday, don't say maybe. Sure.
Okay. Doc PSCT, take 1.
This is a lot, I know. There's a reason Yu-Gi-Oh! Has gained a reputation in recent years as a game for lawyers. A significant amount of a card's power has to do with how effectively duelists have scrutinized its text, but I can at least attest to the fact the alternative is a lot worse. In 2011, Yu-Gi-Oh! Released something called problem-solving card text, a standardization of card mechanics that's resulted in the bloated but functional rules above. Before that, there was simplified effect text, which was better than nothing, but still extremely imprecise, and before that there was nothing. Cards worked or didn't based on the interpretation of whoever was the head judge of the event you were at. Here's a great example. Last Will is a card so powerful it saw consistent play until its banning, despite the fact that no one knew how it worked. How many times can you fetch a monster? Is it every time a monster is sent? Can you activate this if a monster hasn't left the field yet, hoping the effect will be active later? Does using that pocket effect start a chain? Can your opponent respond to it? These questions were so hotly debated that communities that play historic formats that include this card still get in arguments about how it should work. Speaking of hotly debated and frustrating grammatical arguments, let's talk about missing the timing. Even if your interest in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is relegated to pointing and laughing from the commander table, you may have heard of missing the timing. If this is you, by the way, enjoy the next 8 universes beyond and leave us be. Missing the timing is the new player turnoff. If you can make it through this, the rest of the video will go down like an if-then. Missing the timing is a community-created piece of jargon used to refer to the quirkiness that occurs with a very specific type of effect activation. Many cards, mostly monsters with trigger effects, will bifurcate these effects by mandatory or optional. Mandatory effects will be worded like, if X happens, or when X happens, while optional effects will be worded like, if X happens, then you can Y, or when X happens, then you can Y. Missing the timing only occurs with the latter effect. For a when you can effect, the last thing that happened has to be the trigger condition being met. And when I say the last thing, I mean the last thing. Let's use one of the classic timing missers, Dupe Frog, to explain. Dupe Frog is on your side of the field. You activate Pot of Greed, and your opponent chains Raigeki Break, targeting your Dupe Frog. You resolve the chain, and looky there, Dupe Frog is in the graveyard. Time to search. Well, not so fast. At the point that Dupe Frog went to the graveyard, you were still resolving the effect of Pot of Greed. He missed his chance. And the timing. Okay, well, what if instead he's minding his own business when your opponent instead fires a Soul Taker? Destroyed, so let's search again, right? Wrong again. Soul Taker performs an action, then gains life. As explained above, a then conjunction happens sequentially. Something's going on while he's being destroyed, and therefore he's missing the timing. Synchro summoning with Dupe Frog? Fat chance. The last thing to happen was a monster being summoned. Missing the timing. The good news is that this doesn't come up often. Konami's done a pretty good job ensuring they never print a card that works like this again. But Konami's hardly perfect. Let's finish up our discussion of monster cards with an easy one. Abilities. Many cards have an additional word by their type line that describes another quality of them. Flip, Tune, Gemini, and Spirit. The latter three aren't particularly popular, and we'll spell out how they work in their effect text, so for now let's talk about flips. As discussed earlier, when a monster is normal summoned, it can be normal summoned in face-up attack or set in face-down defense position. Provided it wasn't summoned this turn, a face-up monster can change its battle position once per turn, and a set monster may use that change to be flipped face-up. If a monster has a flip effect, this will trigger it. If a monster with a flip effect is attacked, it will be triggered as well. Let's move on to Magic cards. Gem!
Do we need to go past there?
We're cool.
Okay, so...
The other flip take is fine.
Okay, how did you want to transition out of here?
I don't know.
Ugh. Holy.
Yeah. Let's talk about Magic cards. Spell cards, actually. If you'll recall, Yu-Gi-Oh! Used to be a send-up to Magic the Gathering, so early sets called these teal cards Magic cards. Unfortunately, it turns out you can't call the cards of a game that isn't Magic cards, so they were pretty quickly changed to be spell cards by the release of Magic Ruler. Hilariously, that set also had to have its name changed to Spell Ruler. Anyway, there's 6 types of spell cards denoted by their icon, and like monsters, they can be played either face up or face down. Firstly are spell cards without an icon. These are called normal spell cards. They're one-time use cards with a singular effect. You can activate a spell card during the main phase whenever you're just fucking around by placing it into one of your unoccupied spell and trap zones, declaring the effect, and then sending the card to the graveyard. Next up are equip spell cards. These cards affect a face-up monster as part of the activation. Usually they give it some sort of benefit. You can equip an equip spell to either player's face-up monster, and it remains on the field as long as that monster's face-up. When the equipped monster is removed from the field or flipped face down, the equipped spell is destroyed. Continuous spell cards remain on the field once they are activated, and usually, but not always, include a continuous effect that will continue applying as long as they are face up. Field spell cards are just continuous spell cards that end up in the field spell zone. Equip spell cards, field spell cards, and continuous spell cards also function in a strange way with respect to destruction. Yu-Gi-Oh! Takes great pains to differentiate destruction and negation. If you activate a Raigeki Break targeting my Diane Keto the Cure Master, I'm still gaining 1,000. The effect's already been activated. This is true for every type of spell except these 3, equips, continuous, and field spells. They have to remain on field for their activated effects to resolve. Quick play spell cards are spells that can be activated during any phase of the turn. These can be activated on either player's turn, but in order to activate them on an opponent's turn, they'll need to first be set on your side of the field. Notably, when you set a quick play spell, you may not activate it on the same turn. Finally, let's talk about the last 2 kinds of spells. Ritual spells are used to perform ritual summons and operate exactly like normal spells. This is a kind of special summon that requires a ritual monster, colored light blue, in your hand and material from your hand or field. This whack-ass summoning condition is a holdover from early Yu-Gi-Oh! Before people realized a 3-card combo you have to draw isn't very good. Ritual monsters aren't particularly prevalent, but to make up for their whack-ass summoning condition, the super type is often given just... Ugh. No, I'm good. The super type is often just given cards that add 3 or 4 additional cards to hand, so don't be too surprised if they're broken. Which leads us to the last type of spells, pendulums. Depending on who you talk to, pendulums are the super type that put the nail in Yu-Gi-Oh's coffin. Unintuitive, covered in text, and responsible for some of the weirdest rulings imaginable, it's not surprising to see animosity for this summoning type. That said, I always found it misplaced. Sure, they take a little explaining, but once you've heard how pendulums work once, you get it. Pendulums are cards that act like both spells and monsters. While in your hand, they can either be summoned or placed into your leftmost and rightmost spell and trap zones. While occupied with a pendulum card, these zones become pendulum zones. The cards within them are able to use their pendulum effect, written here, as any continuous spell would. If any of these face-up cards on the field would be sent to the graveyard, they are instead placed on top of your extra deck, face up. Once per turn, if both pendulum zones are occupied, you may perform a pendulum summon, special summoning any number of monsters with a level between the 2 monsters on your pendulum monsters box, called a pendulum scale, from your hand or face-up extra deck. The monsters in your extra deck specifically have to be summoned to an extra monster zone. Okay, still with me? Now you may not believe it, but that last paragraph has been the death of thousands of duelists. If you find yourself a little bewildered by pendulum, don't worry, there aren't very many good ones. Konami has at least taken the criticism of this super type to heart. Lastly, let's talk about trap cards. Trap cards are part of the allure of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards whose existence on the field makes an opponent play differently. Many card games allow you to interact with an opponent via powerful onboard tricks or secretive hand shenaniganry, but in Yu-Gi-Oh! Your cards are on the table. This mind game between players, is that set card a spell they just put face down? Is it a trap they can't activate? Or is it the one card that will cause my entire strategy to crumble, is one of Yu-Gi-Oh's biggest strengths. So it's shocking to see that the cards are so simplistic. There are only 3 types of trap cards, but they all share the same characteristic. They must be set for a turn before they can be activated. On your turn, during your main phase, you can place one face down in one of your spell and trap card zones. Starting in your opponent's draw phase, you can activate a trap card whenever you like, provided you've met the activation condition. Normal trap cards are just what it says on the tin. Single use, goes to the graveyard after activation. Continuous trap cards are a little different. These cards, like continuous spell cards, stick around. Usually these will have ignition effects that you can activate in response to an opponent's action, or a continuous effect that will warp the entire game state. Like continuous spells, they must remain face up to apply their effects. A destruction effect will cause them to resolve without effect. Finally, counter traps are trap cards that are spell speed 3. They're differentiated from normal trap cards based on the position they occupy in a chain. Chains. Right. Okay. Chains are Yu-Gi-Oh's way of creating a system for taking actions, then responding to an opponent's actions. Whenever an opponent activates a card or effect, a chain is created. Then you may respond with an effect of your own. If your opponent declines to activate an effect, you may add a second effect of your own afterwards. Once both players are done adding effects, the chain resolves backwards in full. The last card activated all the way down to the bottom. This ain't magic. You can't let some of the stack resolve or target things further down on the stack. One big chain resolves all at once. But that's not all. You're also only allowed to respond to chain effects that have a certain spell speed. You can only respond in a chain with an effect of spell speed 2 or higher, and you must respond with an effect of equal or greater spell speed. As an example, every type of spell except quick play spells and every type of monster effect except quick effects are spell speed 1, and therefore can't be used to respond to a chain. Spell speed 2 effects include quick play spells, quick effects, and almost all trap cards. Spell speed 3 is exclusively reserved for counter traps and usually closes the chain. Let's see an example in action. You normal summon a Neo-Spacian Aqua Dolphin. You pay the cost for his effect, and your opponent responds with Forbidden Chalice, which they set a turn prior. You respond with a Magic Jammer, which is spell speed 3. Your opponent has a second Forbidden Chalice set, but because Forbidden Chalice has a spell speed of 2 and Magic Jammer has a spell speed of 3, they cannot respond. You look at their hand and discard a piece of Exodia, let's say. But what happens when more than one effect meets its trigger condition at the same time? Well, that's governed by a principle called See-Gawk. Many of you may think you're already a master of seeing Gawk, but what I'm talking about is simultaneous effects go on chain. When multiple trigger effects would occur at the same time, they're activated in the following order: the turn player's mandatory effects, the opponent's mandatory effects, the turn player's optional effects, and the non-turn player's optional effects. If there are 2 or more of any individual type of effect, the turn player may order them as they wish. As a final note, the turn player always has the first shot at starting a chain with a quick effect. If 2 effects meet their activation conditions at the same time, and one is a higher priority to resolve than another, you can chain block with some clever chain ordering. For a classic example, Sword Soul will often summon Chi Xiao using a copy of Moye. When Moye is sent to the graveyard for a synchro summon, you may draw a card, a nice little bonus but nothing to write home about. And when Chi Xiao is summoned, you may add a Sword Soul card to your hand, often a game determinative action. Since both effects are optional, ordering the chain so that Chi Xiao is Chainlink 1 and Moye is Chainlink 2 insulates against cards like Ash Blossom, which may negate the effects of cards that add a card to hand. This is the full skeleton of Yu-Gi-Oh! Action, reaction, action. Now that you know everything there is to know about the cards, let's talk about the duel. The goal of a game of Duel Monsters is to win. You can do this one of 3 ways. Either by bringing an opponent's life points from their starting total of 8,000 to 0 by dealing damage with your monsters, spells, and traps, causing an opponent to draw a card while they have none left in their main deck, or by resolving an alternate win condition.
This card is useless.
99% of the duels you play will be decided by life point damage. The remaining 1% will likely be determined by milling. A popular deck at the time of recording, Runic has the ability to pivot to this win con in board states where they've completely lost control of the field. But despite its rarity, the win condition that looms largest in the psyche of your average duelist is the alternate win condition. It's not hard to see why. The very first complete duel played on screen in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime involves Yugi drawing all 5 pieces of the puzzle, and the alternate win condition Exodia obliterating a game he was otherwise losing. In fact, the first release of the head of Exodia in Japan was responsible for a devastating riot. At a tournament at the Tokyo Dome, attendees were told in advance they could pick up a premium pack containing the only ever print of Exodia's head that would ever be made. This was enough for 65,000 people to swarm the Dome, overwhelming the single vendor with nowhere near enough to distribute. Since then, these alternate win conditions have only been playable a few times in total, and mostly by the same guy over and over again.
So I am here with Jeff Leonard, probably the individual more responsible for getting cards hit than any other. I see you've got your 2 namesakes there in the background.
That's right.
So you are known in the community for a number of things, but probably the most important one is playing the most frustrating decks known to man. One of which centered around a card Final Countdown and its associated partner in crime, Mystic Mine, and the other centered around Exodia the Forbidden One, 2 different alt win conditions. How did you use them over the course of your Yu-Gi-Oh! Career?
Finding Mystic Mine was like the perfect card because I had always played stun decks against my son Jason's combo decks. But then after that, after those years that Mystic Mine was around and I got to inflict so much pain, then I had to find something different to do. And that's when Jason finally said to me, hey, why don't you just play FTK decks? There's not a lot of hand traps in the format. Why don't you just try to play an FTK deck? So I played Bish Balkan FTK for a while, and that was a ton of fun. And then along came this Exodia combo. And as soon as we saw the combo, we said, stop right there. We're going to throw everything at it to make it happen.
So you very famously played this deck in a feature match against one of the best players in the game. And what was that like? Was it cool to have the crowd hyping you up as you searched Exodia pieces?
Absolutely amazing. I mean, you just can't imagine the feeling of being on that stage. And what was kind of lucky about it was our round got started late, and the buzz in the room was getting around. And by the time we were in game 3, I mean, there were so many people up there and they knew what was going on. And then just the fact that just somebody mentioned one more piece, and that got going in the crowd. And it was so funny.
One more piece. The crowd is chanting, one more piece. This is a historical moment here in Indianapolis. Oh my goodness.
And then Justin Singh was just like the perfect opponent for me. When round 4 started and I saw his name on the list, I said, well, this is it. It's either going to happen now or it's not going to happen. And so when they brought us up on the stage, it was just fantastic.
That's fantastic. You mentioned playing with your son. How did you get into Yu-Gi-Oh?
Oh, we've been playing ever since he was 5 years old and started watching the show when it first came out. We got the 2 structure decks. He had the Yugi, I had the Kaiba, and we've just been playing off and on for 20 plus years, and going to YCSs, just recently, really competitively when he probably turned 16, 17. So the last 10 years. Just really been so much fun for us to hang out and have something to do together and talk about just basically every day, talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's a great thing.
Well, I have to ask you one more question. You're known for playing Mystic Mine. You're known for playing Exodia. Have you ever considered playing like a normal deck?
No chance, Joseph. Let me tell you something. A 55-year-old brain works a whole lot differently than a 25-year-old brain. You'll get there one of these days and you'll find out. But Jason told me, hey, you can probably remember one combo, right? One combo. And I was like, I don't know if I can. But I did learn one combo. I was able to practice. Remember, I was on that MCS with you, and I wanted to do it after we got home from YCS Indianapolis. And I was able to pull off Exodia on Master Duel. And I remember you saying on the telecast, if this boomer can remember to push the buttons, he's going to win this duel. And that's exactly what happens, is I have to remember the right buttons to push.
Well, congratulations on an unbelievable achievement. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to talk to me.
You bet. Thanks, Joseph.
I should note that duelists playing competitively are only given a certain amount of time to complete a best 2 out of 3 match. If that time runs out, both players lose. While each duel is different, they all start the same way. Shuffle your deck, then give your opponent's deck a shuffle or cut as well. Roll a die to decide who starts, and you're off. Shuffling is a contentious point among Yugists. I don't know if it's a genetic memory from growing up watching Bandit Keith or whatever, but still, it's always a good practice to make sure your opponent's deck is sufficiently randomized. After determining who goes first, it's time to proceed through the phases of the game. First up is the draw phase. No draw on the first turn, otherwise the turn player draws a card from the top of their deck, then proceeds to the next phase. This liminal phase actually serves an impressive purpose. It's the first time an opponent can activate a quick effect during the turn. Often, players who want to shotgun an important effect as fast as possible will do so in the draw phase. Trust me, there's nothing more devastating than asking, draw phase, and seeing your opponent smirk and send a dimension shifter to the graveyard. Next is the standby phase. This is a pass-through phase, and frequently doesn't matter at all. Specific cards will often reference costs that must be paid during the standby phase, and like the draw phase, it's an opportunity for an opponent to activate a quick effect. Third is the main phase. The main phase is where most of the action of a turn will happen. It's the time in which you may deploy your cards to set up before launching an attack. During this phase, you may perform your normal summon, perform as many special summons as you like using the effects or abilities of your cards, change the battle position of a monster, but only if the monster was not played this turn, and only once that turn, set spell and trap cards in your spell and trap zone, activate as many spell cards as you like, and as many trap cards as you like, provided they've been set for at least a turn, and activate the effects of your monsters. Once you're done with your setup, you can proceed to the battle phase, unless it's the first turn. This one's exactly what's written on the tin. In the battle phase, your monsters battle. There are 4 sub-steps to this phase. First is the start step, in which players can activate spell speed to effects before an attack is declared. Next is the battle step. The turn player will pick one attack position monster from their side of the field and one monster on the opponent's side of the field, then declare an attack. To determine the winner of the battle, look at the attack and defense stats of the 2 monsters who are battling. If both monsters are in attack position, the monster with the higher attack wins, the losing monster is destroyed, and the difference between the 2 stats is subtracted from the loser's life point total. If there's a tie, both monsters are destroyed and no player takes damage, with an exception for 0 attack monsters who cannot crash. If one monster is in attack and one is in defense position, use the defense position stat for the defense position monster. If it is less than the attack stat, the defense position monster is destroyed, but the player does not take the difference as battle damage. Finally, if the defense stat is equal to or higher than the attack stat, both monsters survive, but the attacking player loses the difference between the attack stat and the defense stat. If one player has no monsters on their side of the field, a player may attack their life points directly, dealing the entire attack stat as damage. This stuff is pretty intuitive. Big monster beat little monster, defense position defends, attack position attacks. What's less intuitive is the order in which these monsters deal damage. Let's talk about the damage step. The damage step is performed immediately after the battle step ends if an attack is still occurring. Like Magic the Gathering's Layers, this is to resolve finicky rulings weirdness that have built up like rust over 3 decades of carving a rule set into an understandable shape. But unlike Magic the Gathering's Layers, this one does come up pretty frequently.
Yep, it's the lug nut. Fixed it. Please have a seat.
Usually, duelists will shortcut this or not mention it at all, but it unfortunately does have pretty significant gameplay ramifications. It's divided into 5 sub-steps. Let's begin with the start of the damage step. As a general rule, once a duelist declares they're moving to the damage step, certain new rules apply. Duelists may no longer activate spell speed to effects, unless those cards have a provision that states they may activate during the damage step. An exception to this rule is spell trap cards or quick effects that directly alter the attack or defense of a monster, cards that negate the activation, not the effect, of a card or effect, and mandatory effects. Note that spell speed 3 effects specifically can be activated at any time during the damage step. Next is before damage calculation. During this step, if the monster you're attacking is face down, you flip it up. Third is perform damage calculation. From this point forward, you may not activate cards that modify the attack and defense stats of monsters. During this stage, you determine if a monster has been destroyed by battle, though it is not yet sent to the graveyard. Fourth is after damage calculation. Destroyed monsters are still not sent to the graveyard. This is a step specifically for the benefit of cards that mention it. And finally, end of the damage step. Monsters that have been destroyed are now sent to the graveyard. Once there are no longer any effects to apply, we once again return to the battle step. The damage step plays a finicky role in Yu-Gi-Oh! With clever use of your points of interaction, you can manage your individual negation in such a way that your opponent's responses are very limited.
Oh my god!
It impacts card quality too. Cards like Forbidden Droplet are much more playable as a result of their applications during this weird, unrespondable step. One of the most debilitating things you can hear as a duelist in combat is the phrase, "proceed to the damage step."
Oh my god, give me a good draw, please.
So Alex, I'm happy we could have you on today to talk about the damage step, something with which you are intimately familiar.
Damage step? Yes, I am quite intimate with this, for those of you who are fans of the progression series. But the damage step is A doozy, that's for sure.
To give people who are kind of newer to the game an overview, what exactly is the damage step?
So the damage step is this weird part of when you're attacking, or I guess if your opponent's attacking you, there's multiple sub-steps of the damage step that basically, to boil it down simply, certain cards can be activated at certain points within the damage step, and once you pass some of those thresholds, you're no longer able to activate certain cards or effects. But it's a very timed window that certain cards can be applied, and your knowledge of it can actually make or break a difference in the game.
But you personally have spent a lot more time in the damage step than most duelists, is that correct?
Yeah. When we did Prague Season 1, I played Blackwing, I think, for like 40 episodes in a row, and Kalut is one of the all-stars of the damage step, alongside with our good old friend Honest, if we're looking back during that time as well. Those are two of the classic examples of the damage step. You hear those two fateful words from the opponent when you go to attack and they go damage step, and you want to cry your eyes out because you know you're gonna get bodied.
Let's just get a hypothetical going. Let's say you have a card like Shura the Blue Flame and your opponent has a 1900 attack point monster on their side of the field. What does deploying a card like Kalut look like?
So for those who are unaware, Kalut is a hand trap of sorts that says during the damage step, you can discard it from your hand to the graveyard, and it gives a Blackwing monster 1400 attack. This is relevant because when you declare an attack, on attack declaration, there are certain cards that can be used. But once your opponent passes priority over to you, that they don't have any response to the attack declaration, that is when you can, in the damage step, deploy your Kalut. So it's after this type of effect has bypassed, essentially. So now they can no longer use these types of trap effects to be able to stop you in combat, unless they have a card that can be activated in the damage step itself.
All right, well, thank you so much for hopping on. We'll probably just cut a whole bunch of clips of Gage going here.
Damage step, I will Kalut.
Okay.
Kalut. It's now 3,700. I'll go ahead and attack with Boar then as well.
All right, and then you would only gain 14, would put you to 31. Yeah, I'm fine with this. Do you want to activate a Kalut?
Damage step.
Yep.
I'll activate Kalut.
Okay.
I'm actually going to Kalut and damage step.
Okay, so I'll take another 14.
So the attack will continue, and I'm actually going to take... so then damage step, I just Kalut here.
Yeah, you got it.
I'll activate a second Kalut. Good game, buddy!
Back to the battle phase. Each attack position monster may attack one time. Once you're out of attacks, or if you decide you don't want to declare anymore, you enter the end step of the battle phase, another opportunity to activate quick effects. After the battle phase is over, then you enter main phase 2. This post-battle main phase is identical to the one you took before battle. This one's weird philosophically. Main phase 2 serves a pretty important role in Yu-Gi-Oh! Often, your opponent's setup turn will result in a few monsters specifically designed to curb your ability to set up yourself. So you'll set up minimally, run over said monsters in battle, then do a full setup afterwards. This is unquestionably a holdover from Yu-Gi-Oh's days as a Magic the Gathering ripoff, and in future products like Duel Links and Rush Duel, they've done away with it entirely. Importantly, you can only perform a main phase 2 if you've performed a battle phase, so you will not have one of these on turn 1 or on any turn where you declined to enter the battle phase. Finally, you'll enter the end phase. Once again, this is an opportunity to activate Spell Speed 2 effects. The turn player will also need to discard down to 6 cards in hand if they're carrying more than that. And that's a turn. Your opponent proceeds through the same steps, and you'll continue until someone hits a win condition. And that's how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! But it's only really half the story. It is how to play Yu-Gi-Oh!, but I may as well have just told you how to make a meal you have no intention of ever cooking, or how to fix a car you don't have. Becoming integrated into Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't a process of mastering the damage step, or ensuring you never miss the timing. It's a kind of cultural osmosis, entering a community and finding out which of the 1,000 niches you'd like to fit into, or if you'd like to carve one out yourself. If you want to take the plunge and actually start playing the game, you have a few options in terms of how. Master Duel is the gold standard of online play. This client was developed by Konami and is completely above board. The downside is, it costs money. While it's very free-to-play friendly, you can't exactly hop to a different deck on a dime. What's more, it lags behind paper card releases by a pretty substantial margin, about 3 months out from the TCG. But it's not your only option. When faced with the prospect of being a cheap bastard, Yu-Gi-Oh! Players suddenly become rocket scientists. For the entirety of Yu-Gi-Oh!'s existence, there have existed questionably legal free simulators to play the game. If you want to try out cards immediately, Edo Pro and Yu-Gi-Oh! Omega are where you should be. These are automatic simulators, like Master Duel, and as a result are good for players that aren't yet comfortable with their cards' incredibly long effects. Both are completely free to play and download, community created, and are updated extremely quickly. Finally, Dueling Book is an in-browser simulator, and likely the largest simulator at the time of recording. It's what everyone from weekend warriors to professional players use to improve at the game, and it's all manual, which means you'll actually have to know your stuff before you load in. So rather than a step-by-step guide through a Snake Eyes setup, here's a more realistic example of how a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Plays out. It's 2001, and you've just achieved the miracle of consciousness. Only a few short years after realizing you're in control of your own actions, you make the decision to watch an episode of a show on Kids WB. It looks sort of like Pokemon, but edgier. You're enraptured. You beg your parents for packs of overpriced cardboard, and you jam casuals on the playground until your teacher gets a call from a concerned mother about devil worship and decides to intervene, taking your cards away. In the years following, you keep Yu-Gi-Oh! In the back of your mind, but don't admit to yourself you found it fun or engaging. A decade later, you're pawing at your phone during a period of unemployment and see Yugi staring back at you from the App Store. Duel Links is one of the top downloaded applications this month. Figuring it couldn't be worse for you than TikTok, you download it and give it a go. And you're immediately back. You can't believe how much the game has changed. When you were playing, games lasted dozens of turns, but now you're comboing off from the first second of every duel. What's more, you're having fun. A few months into a daily Duel Links grind, you see an in-app ad for Master Duel, the Steam client for the real version of the card game. You decide to try that out as well. It's an impressively hard learning curve, but you persevere, due in part to a desire to prove to people online you won't get filtered. While looking up guides on YouTube, you run into a Twitch streamer. You start checking out their community, and soon you're spamming Pop-da-Baby memes in Farfa's chat. You start making friends from Twitch chat, from Discord communities, from Pet Deck Facebook groups. Finally, one day, one duelist reaches out to you. Hey, we're gonna try and go to the next YCS. You in? Your friends book the cheapest hotel near the convention center they can find, and try to sneak 9 people into a 2-person reservation. You stay up late in the business center, trying out different lines versus your friends' different strategies. The next day, you head to the convention, sit down in front of someone you've never met before, wish them good luck, and that's